Hi, everybody. Dan Oman, Mike Beer. We're in a celebratory mood here at DRF because last week we exceeded 20,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. I want to thank our producers, Chloe and Lucia, for their excellent work, all the great handicappers and analysts that contribute to the DRF YouTube channel. And of course, I want to thank all of you who allow us into your homes and on your phones to watch the DRF analysis and let us talk racing with you. And if you haven't subscribed just yet, please do so because join the party. We've got cupcakes, 20K, DRF. Mike, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it certainly is. I got a cupcake too, in case you were wondering. I got one. Yeah, I want to thank everybody for subscribing, Dan. I gotta feel like most people probably join in because of you, Dan. You're a true professional. I'm happy to be working with you, and I'm happy people tune in.
Mike, you're very honest, and that's why you're a great handicapper, because you can spot talent. That's why he's the best analyst in the business. Thank you very much. 20,000 subscribers. Here's to 20K more.
Hi, everybody. Mike Beer here. We have stakes action on Sunday afternoon at the Big A Aqueduct. Early on the card, race number 3 will be the Plenty of Grace Stakes. $100,000 purse. It's for older fillies and mares, 4-year-olds and up. They're going to go 1 mile on the turf course. Let's take a look at this field right now. Very short field. That's why this race is going early on this card. Only 6 entered for turf. A field of 7 overall. The horse drawn to the far outside post, the number 7, Impassable Donna, is entered for main track only here. So we're going to go with a field of 6 on the turf, but we do have at least some interesting horses in here, if only because we have a horse who, down on the rail, Malavath, who was last seen running in the Breeders' Cup Mile. That was her second foray over here to North America, because she also ran in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf at the end of her 2-year-old campaign at Del Mar. In November of 2021, finished a good second that day, earned a triple-digit buyer, finishing a pretty close 5th at the Breeders' Cup Mile in her most recent start. She's a Group 2 winner over in France, Group 1 placed over there as well. She's got the credentials to be really, really tough in a race like this one. She's off the layoff in this race for trainer Christophe Clement, and she's probably going to be a pretty short price when the betting is all said and done. I suppose the other horse that could take some money away from her in this race is drawn to the outside in this field. Number 6 is White Beam, a Juddmonte import here, going to make her first start for trainer Chad Brown. Very lightly raced 4-year-old, a filly who won 3 races in a row, just sort of gradually progressing over in England last year as a 3-year-old, got herself a stakes placing in September. That was a pretty good performance that day, going this 1 mile distance at Newmarket. She got into a little bit of a tight spot between horses in the late stages of that race, dueled to the wire, just missed at the end, but it was another good performance for her. She's off the layoff here, again, making her first start for trainer Chad Brown. He'll run her right in a sort of a logical race here in the Plenty of Grace, going a mile. Appears to be training really well down in Florida prior to shipping up for this race. So she's a horse who's certainly going to draw some interest in here. It feels like those 2 Euro imports probably going to take the bulk of the play in this race. And you know, we'll just see if they wind up simply just being too good for these American-based horses. I don't think that would be a surprise to just about anybody in here. Let's start off by taking a look at the Timeform US Pace Projector, because this could be an advantage, certainly for the American horses. The number 2, Evie Jets, who is a filly who does like to be forward in her races. She does not need to be on the lead to be effective, but in a race like this one, the way this thing is shaping up, there's no reason for her not to just go straight to the front in this race and just see if anybody can run her down in this race. Eric Cancel will keep the mount for her. She had a very solid campaign last year as a 4-year-old for trainer Mertan Cantermachi. This horse only went 2 for 7, but she finished second another 4 times. She was a grade 3 winner. She was grade 3 placed when they tried to stretch her out to 9 furlongs. This is her best distance, though. She's very versatile, but she has speed, and in this race, they're just supposed to put her right on the front and try to make these 2 European fillies try to run her down, because we'll start off by taking a look at the horse who will probably go favored down at the rail, Malavath. And you can just see when you look at her running line, she just does not have a lot of speed at all, and that could really work against her here as she starts back in her first start since that Breeders' Cup Mile back in early November. She ran fine in that race, a race where didn't break that sharply. That was also the case when they came over for the Breeders' Cup as a 2-year-old. Didn't break that sharply. Both of those races, she pulled very, very similar trips. Didn't break that well from the gate, angled right over to the inside in the early stages, and just stayed in at the back of the pack in both of those races. And in both of those races, the trips actually worked out for her. She never really got stopped. She wound up getting room in the stretch, and she ran on both times. You go back and watch that Breeders' Cup Mile. She had plenty of room down and towards the inside in the stretch. Everybody in that field, as they came into the top of the stretch, everybody just sort of fanned out in front of her. She had plenty of room to move up. She got herself into contention with a look at that thing, and she did her best. She just wasn't good enough. She wound up getting out finished. She settled for fifth. She was a huge price that day. She's going to be a much shorter price here, but just based on her overall form, she has the credentials to be just simply be too good for these horses, and maybe that will be the case. But her running style could pose a little bit of a problem here for Jose Ortiz. We'll see what kind of trip she gets. Evie Jets is the 2. And that pace projector that we just looked at, that's her real advantage in this race. And that's not to say that she isn't a talented filly mare in her own right, because she is. She's run nothing but good races. She's very consistent. And again, she has really good tactical speed. So, if she winds up in one of these races going forward where she can't make the lead, that's not really an issue for her. She'll rate very kindly and still come with a big burst of speed into the stretch. That's sort of been her MO through most of her races. But in this race, they just have to put her on the lead and see what happens. She's off of a layoff of her own. But she's run well fresh in the past in her career, and I feel like in this kind of a race, it could just really be a big advantage for her to just go right to the front and just say, catch me if you can in this race. She was really good last year. I mentioned that Athenia, they tried to get 9 furlongs out of her. She ran really well that day on the lead, sprinting for home through the stretch, but she just didn't really want to go that far and got run down at the end. But she bounced out of that. They cut her back to a mile in the Noble Damsel right here at Aqueduct, going this 1 mile distance, and she won that race. Just got forward in there. Another horse wanted the lead, so she just sat tracking a long shot up front. When it was time to go, she just took over, and I thought she powered clear late in that race pretty impressively. I liked that performance from her. Her advantage here could just be the trip that she pulls, and I think she's a dangerous horse for these 2 Euros to have to deal with off the layoff. Spirit and Glory, newly turned 4-year-old for trainer Rob Falcone. Felt like she had something to offer last year. She did wind up winning a stake at Colonial, the Virginia Oaks. She came from way out of it that day to close that race down with a good finish. I was also pretty taken with her stateside debut when she got over here. That was at Belmont Park, going a mile and a 16. She came from last after braking slowly. Didn't really any early speed in that race, but she came with a big run off the turn, and I like the way that she closed that race down. Again, came back and won the Virginia Oaks 2 starts later, and after that, it's all been sort of tougher stakes races for her, and she hasn't really factored in any of them. But her form has held up pretty well. Her running style problematic in here. She's got a little bit more recency though than some of her main contenders in this race, and if the trip somehow works out for her, you'll know her late in this race. She's going to need everything, I think, to go her way in here. But she's a pretty nice filly in her range. She has forward to go. I think you could see her sort of improve throughout 2023 here for a very underrated trainer. Runaway Rumor is up next. She's a New York bred. She's 5 years old now. Was actually a really good 3-year-old. Placed, was a stakes winner as a 3-year-old. Placed in several graded stakes races during that campaign. Just ran really well in just about all of her starts as a 3-year-old. It took her a little while last year. It didn't seem like when she came back off the layup that she came back, right to hand for trainer Jorge Abreu. It took her a while to sort of round into form, but she started doing that as the year went on. And by the time we got through the summer and in towards the end of last year, she was really getting good. A good performance in the Violet at Monmouth to just come up short. A good performance against New York breds in the Hettinger right here at Aqueduct, going 9 furlongs to just miss. And then she closed out the campaign with a nice win in the Ticonderoga. Another horse who just doesn't really have a lot of speed. She's not, a total run closer, but she does like to sit early and then make a run through the stretch, and that might not help her here. But she's a pretty good horse. We'll see if she comes back a little bit sharper off the layoff this year, because that wasn't the case last year. Next up, the number 5 is Toned Up. A horse who's just 1 for 13 on the turf. That lone turf win came way back in September of 2021. She just doesn't really have the races to be competitive in a race like this, and she doesn't have any speed either, and that really works against her. On the outside, the number 6 is White Beam, Chad Brown, Juddmonte Farm. Manny Franco has the mount here. I like what I saw from this filly over in England. last year. I liked the way that she progressed, won those 3 races in a row early on. It just felt like she got better with every one of those starts. The last 2 wins over there, they're not big margins, but they were both really good performances, particularly the win in early August there, where she just sort of sat back. There was a lively pace going on. She sat off it. She came really gamely, though, through this stretch, and I thought she won that race under strong handling. It was only a half-length margin at the end, but she was very strongly handled at the end. I thought she won it easier than it looked. Came back in a stakes race her next start, ran well again to just miss. And that most recent start, they took her to France into a tougher race, and she was really no factor as the favorite. That race contested over heavy ground, and she did not look like she appreciated it at all. She never really picked her feet up. She was just sort of grinding throughout that race and couldn't get involved. She tried really hard. I don't think she liked the going that day. A firmer turf course will probably help her chances over here. She's another one who wasn't really showing, it's always a little bit harder to tell in those races over in England, but she wasn't showing a lot of early speed in those races. So we'll see what kind of trip she can pull in here. I think she's talented. I think she could have a pretty good year over here for Chad and Juddmonte, but maybe the time to beat her is right off the layoff in a race like this, where she might not have that much to run at in the late stages. The horse on the outside, Impassable Dawn, is entered main track only, so we'll see. I'm not a big fan of hers overall, but obviously if she gets in here, she's probably not going to be facing much of a field, but we're going to hope that we don't see her on Sunday at Aqueduct in this Plenty of Grace Stakes, which is actually pretty interesting. You have the 2 Euros, who are clearly the 2 horses to beat. Malavath probably is the horse to beat in here, with the big figure showing from her most recent start, dropping out of the Breeders' Cup. We'll see. I think she's okay, and I have no real problem with her, but I feel like at a short price I could try to beat her in this race. We'll put the picks up there now. Just want to take a little bit of a shot here. Hope I'm catching these 2 Euros off the layoff in the kind of a race that's not going to set up great for them, and maybe I can wire them with the 2 Evie Jets at a fair price. I like this filly. I think she's going to get the right trip in this race. She's a little bit underrated, and I feel like she could maybe take advantage in this fight. She's going to need to show up with her best off the layoff, though. I went 2-6, 1-4 in the Sunday feature. It comes early on the card at Aqueduct. Race number 3, the Plenty of Grace, approximate post time 2:24 Eastern. Good luck.